Hi, welcome to the Frugal Frau. I'm Sukey, your host, and today we're going to show you how we make a very large quarter round, or we like to call it the GONZO quarter round. And this is the very quarter round that we will be making in this video. And here's a little side profile, and this is actually how it would sit from the side so that you know that this is the top and this is the back. Anyways, I have thoroughly documented that and provided drawings for you, so because it can get confusing because we're turning it in multiple angles during the video. So before we get started though, please like, subscribe, comment, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss any of the Frugal Frau and Tom Thomas woodworking series, or some of our homesteading series if you're into that too. Post your comments in the comment section of the videos because we will try to answer every one of those. And if you've got big long comments, you can also put those in, and Tom will try to answer those thoroughly in his Tom Talks Shop series. So let's get started. The red shaded area in the diagram on the right shows a side profile of the final position of the large quarter round in relation to the other trim components. On the left is a photo from an outside door installation of the upper portion of the entire trim group that we are going to make for this series of videos. We are not using a solid single piece for making this trim, but are making a large solid block by laminating together enough pieces to form the size that we need. Here, 3 pieces. Be sure to first flatten the pieces you will need and thickness each individual board so they are of each uniform thickness throughout their length. And then you can glue them together and clamp it as you see Tom doing here. It does not matter that the 3 pieces are not of the same width, as that difference will eventually be planed off. Once the glue has dried and the boards are firmly attached, remove the clamps. Tom is flattening what will be the top face of the quarter round and roughly squaring it off to what will be the back face. In this diagram, I have flipped our large quarter round pattern as you would view it installed. We made the pattern from a leftover offcut that we used in another application. It required having a rabbet at the bottom left, marked in yellow here, to sit over another piece, but in this project that rabbet will not be necessary and therefore will not be cut. It will just be flat on that back face. Next, flatten what will be the back face of this trim. At this stage, Tom is only checking for flatness with his eye, just to get a rough flatten. And he will switch to other planes to get it perfectly flat, and then be checking with a square to make sure that the back face and the top face are exactly square to one another. Don't forget to do that step. It is very, very important. Tom likes to oil his plane soles with his WD-40 drenched sock bundle just to keep the plane sliding along nicely. You might find this helpful too. During this process, check for square periodically until you get it perfectly square or to your satisfaction. Tom set the marking gauge to the final trim height as shown in the lower right of the screen and is marking that along what will be the back face of the trim. And then he merely just colors that in so he can see that clearly. Here I flipped the photo to match the face orientations to the actual trim block. The trim block has now been flipped again so that Tom can plane down the bottom face down to the final trim block height. You might want to mark all your faces so that you don't get this confused while you are working. Tom began with a scrub plane and then switches to his jack plane, and at the end he'll probably switch to his smoothing plane. And again, of course, he will be checking to make sure that this is square with the back face. The back face of the trim block is oriented towards Tom and the top face is resting on the workbench. Tom traces the pattern onto the trim block as shown. Mark a perfectly square line on that bottom edge so that the final height is going to be correct or match the pattern. Scribe the width of the very bottom section along the length of the trim block. Tom is marking a depth line shy of the X'd marked waist area he is going to remove first. Also mark this on the other end. This is so he can quickly plane off that waist without cutting into the area where the actual quarter round will be cut. Mark that same depth line across the entire length of the front face of the trim stock. To keep this all straight, Tom marks all the waist to be cut off with an X pattern. With the bottom face up, Tom cuts into the final bottom face width line with a knife to deepen the scribe mark. Cut diagonally into that deepened scribe line mark with a knife to remove a little bit of waste to make a shelf or shoulder, and that will just help your chisel right along that edge or a plane later on too. Tom uses his 1/2-inch chisel to start removing waste along that line. Be careful not to go below your depth line. After establishing the basic depth along this line, he switches to a larger chisel. Proceed like this throughout the entire length of the trim block. After the majority of the waist is chiseled away down the whole length, Tom switched to a scrub plane, and here he's just adjusting the blade so that it cuts a little bit more aggressively. And this is just, again, to smooth it out a little bit and to remove a lot of waste at once. Be careful not to go past the depth line. Here, Tom has switched to a rabbet plane to clean up that edge, which is right along the bottom edge. So this is a perpendicular to the bottom edge that he's cleaning up along the entire length. In this diagram, he is removing the pink or red shaded area. Tom is now marking the final width of the top face. This line will serve as a depth line to guide the removal of waste when he then turns the trim block over to plane down to that line from the front face. Note that the fence of the marking gauge is run along the back face. He is darkening his line, and the area that's going to be removed, of course, is shown in the shaded blue area in the drawing at the bottom right. The top face is oriented to the workbench now, and the front face is up. Tom is planing down the front face to the depth line that was just marked, which denotes the width of the top face. This also brings all the pieces of the block to the same width, because you'll remember that they were not of the same width when we started. Tom is now just going to smooth off that whole front face. He's using his large smoothing plane to do this. Tom is now going to check for square, as he wants the little vertical part of the front face to be perpendicular to the very top surface. The blue line shows the line that he is marking in the lower right, and then the green is the final profile. Now Tom has flipped the trim block so that he can mark the depth of the waist section to be removed, and I've kind of shaded that in blue in the drawing to the lower right. Next, he darkens the scribe line. The trim block has again been flipped, and the diagram at the lower right shows the current orientation. Tom made another scribe line further out on the blue area, and he's just did that so that he can enhance that line and then get that outer area of the waist removed. And in the diagram in the lower right, that would be the dark blue area. Remove that portion and down the entire length of the trim block. Tom now deepens the scribe line at the front face shoulder edge, and that way he can begin to remove some more of the waist area that is marked by the light blue in the diagram to the lower right. Here, Tom is chiseling away the final bits of the blue area to be removed before he switches to a plane. The chiseling is a quick way to remove most of the waste off, although in a very rough manner. And so he's taken his large rabbet plane, and that way he can not only smooth down the planing, but he can also smooth off the edge of the shoulder. To refine that shoulder edge, he likes to use this wooden rabbet plane on its side and cut it as you see he's doing here. And a little knife work sometimes to get the little bits that just get stubborn and get hung up. A large amount of waste was thus far removed by chiseling and then planing away large rectangular shaped waist portions. Now Tom begins the initial shaping of the quarter round using his jack plane. So essentially what he's doing is making sort of these angled facets that roughly follow the shape of the quarter round that he wants to do at the very end. But rather than using a large roundover at this point, it's just easier to do it as facets and then use the roundover plane at the very end. And here he's using his coffin plane to get some more off. Now why he switched to this, I don't really know why, and he says it just felt like the right thing to do. So that's one of those, well, whatever feels right to you. Most of the waste has been removed, and now Tom can proceed with his number 22 roundover plane to smooth the roundover into a nice quarter round shape. Now I've changed the camera angle to a lower position so that you can get a more profile shot of using the roundover plane to make the quarter round profile. Finally, Tom is now using his little mini plane along the edge of the shoulder at the top of the quarter round. He likes this because it just provides a lot of control and really cleans up those edges when they're in little tight spots like this. And yes, sometimes he has to get his knife out and further clean it up because the grains sometimes change direction in the middle of the piece of wood and then they want to tear out. So he just cuts those away. After cleaning up these two shoulders with the small plane, Tom actually furnished the whole roundover with spills, but somehow I did not get this on camera.